Hey, everybody, it is Trags Mike Petraglia back with another episode of the JungleRoar podcast powered by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Back with me tonight as we record this after a long evening into morning down in Jacksonville, Florida, Everbank Stadium, is the one and only Ben Baby, doing an outstanding job covering the Bengals for ESPN. .com. You can catch all his work there. Also, I want you to follow him on IG Threads. He's a big fan of the platform, and for good reason. His handle there is bbaby41, all one word. You like that, Ben?
I love it. I love it. Listen, I've really, we'll see how Threads does, but I've really enjoyed the Instagram stuff. It does. It's probably kept me a little busier than I've wanted, to be honest, but I've had a lot of fun doing it. But I appreciate the plug. And yes, it's been a long night. I've got some coffee here. So let's talk some Bengals, because I'll tell you what, we probably got a lot more than we thought we were going to get to talk about in that Jacksonville game.
I said that to a number of reporters, Kelsey Conway, among others, walking down to the locker room. I'm like, I frankly did not see this coming. It's a great story for what Jake Browning did. You tweeted out a statistic, and I want to bring it up just so I have it accurate here. It's a remarkable statistic. Per ESPN Stats and Info, Bengals quarterback Jake Browning is the first undrafted player since 1967, and that's common draft era, to throw for 350 passing yards and complete 85% of his passes in a single game. That is a remarkable statistic, Ben.
Yeah, he played out of his mind, and it wasn't just dink and dunk passes either. You look at, what he was able to do. He was able to fit the ball in the tight windows, make key throws in tough situations. I mean, we got a glimpse as to why he won the backup quarterback job and why the Bengals felt good about him being potentially being the backup quarterback going into the season after losing Brandon Allen after last year. And I think that Browning should really be commended. I mean, you talk about a guy who has had to wait a long time for his opportunity, has done a lot of work, has made stayed the course throughout all of the uncertainty of whether he'd ever get a crack. And when his team really needed it, he was phenomenal. I thought yesterday, a couple big throws late in regulation and in overtime on third down to either get points or put the team in position to win that game was really impressive. And I think the biggest thing, Trags, that we learned is that there is no excuse for this Bengals team now. This offense is good enough to make the postseason if they can get hot at the right time, which they obviously will need. But, there are no more questions about what they can do or what they can't do without Burrow. They clearly are good enough to be able to win games.
3rd and 2 at their own 24-yard line. And you think, well, they're going to be conservative. They only need 2 yards. Maybe they'll throw to the tight end. Maybe they'll run the ball. Certainly on Monday night, we actually saw the Bengals run the ball 30 times, 27, I guess, or 28 if you take away the runs of Jake Browning. But they actually ran the ball. But on that 3rd and 2, in the third quarter, Jake Browning throws his best pass of the night. He, not just because it was a 76-yard touchdown to Jamar Chase, but because it was a dime right on the money on the sideline. It had to be in a perfect spot, hit Jamar Chase really pretty much in stride, and it was Katie bar the door. I was just so impressed by so many aspects of that play, not the least of which is that Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan trusted Jake to throw that ball.
Yeah, hold on. What you said, Katie bar the door? What does that mean?
Katie bar the door means don't hold anything back. And Katie bar the door is an expression, Ben, of there was no holding back. Let it all hang out. Let it loose. How's that? Does that help you?
What's the I feel like I'm at the spelling bee now. Can I get the source of origin?
Oh, boy, I'd have to look that up. You know what? Answer the question. I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. I'll look it up, and you answer the question. Go ahead.
Now I need the question again. About remind me. I guess it was about the aggressiveness, correct?
The aggressiveness of on 3rd and 2 on the first drive of the third quarter when the Bengals had made a stop. got the ball back from Jacksonville. Actually, one of the better defensive stands that the Bengals had in that game was Jacksonville gets the ball to start the second half. They force a punt, and then the Bengals get the ball, and they have 3rd and 2 at their own, 24-yard line, and Jake Browning pulls the trigger on that bomb.
Yeah, I think that was huge. And I thought what Browning said after the game was really interesting in that, the fact that they were able to run the ball effectively early, and especially in a running situation, you get that down and distance. Like you said, you were expecting potentially the Bengals to go on the ground. And that was actually the perfect time to get a one-on-one matchup with Jamar Chase on the outside. I really like the aggressiveness from Zach Taylor. I think that's a throw that you feel comfortable letting Jake Browning go, make it, because, there's only a couple of things really bad that can occur. You have an incompletion, obviously you punt, but if he misses, it's more likely on a sideline ball that there's a good chance if you miss outside, it's going to be an incompletion because it's going to be out of bounds. So you don't have to worry about it that way. And then you've got a lot of trust that Jamar Chase is going to be able to make something happen on the ball when it comes his way, if it was underthrown or whatever it may be. So I think you should feel that's the luxury of having a guy like Jamar Chase, is that, that, as Burrow has said before, Jamar is down there somewhere. And, I think that was a massive play, not just for the game, but to give this team confidence that this offense can go out and make those big plays. And Trags, let's be honest, even when Joe Burrow was healthy, we were not seeing that level of explosiveness from this offense. That big play capability was something that I believe had been lacking. I know we've seen it in spurts, but by and large, it felt like a throwback to really the 2021 season when you saw a lot of go balls to Jamar, and they were really, it added a new dynamic to the offense at the time. And so, I think that is huge for them moving forward, giving them confidence in a lot of games that I think are very winnable for them.
After the game, asked Jake Browning about that play, and he said, if we're not running the ball as effectively as we were during the game, he probably doesn't get the busted coverage in one-on-one man coverage on the outside. And I also asked Orlando Brown Jr. the same question after the game, after he had spoken about Jackass. I pulled him aside privately and asked him about that play, and he said they were going to be in cover 2 normally in situations like that on film, but because the Bengals were successful running the ball last night and were committed to it, they came out of their cover 2 shell a little bit, and that is why Jamar Chase was more open on the outside.
Yeah, last night was a very interesting night for establish the run discourse. I am still anti-team establish the run.
I know you are.
I don't know. I know that I am in the minority amongst us on the beat about that concept, and many in Cincinnati. I know that for a fact, and I do agree with the philosophy of if the numbers aren't there, there is no point in running the ball. If you're able to pass the ball for more yards, it's a more effective way to go down the field. Like I like to tell people in the great state of Texas and down south, that there's a certain way we play the game of football, and we like to throw it around a little bit.
You do.
However, Trags, I have come around to the Midwestern sensibilities of how football can have a sense of balance to it. And I think that the more time I've spent in the NFL, I think you cannot go, because the defenses are too good, edge rushers are too good. You cannot just go and drop back as much as we've seen the Bengals do. And you've got to have some sort of a run game that opponents are nervous about, not necessarily scared, but they at least have to account for it. And so often we've seen defenses not even account for the run, which makes it difficult for the Bengals to throw the ball, because essentially that's what this is about, right? When you talk about establishing the run, it's so you are able to pass the ball effectively. It's almost a backdoor way of saying, we know passing the ball is incredibly important. It's the most important thing. And if we're able to run the ball effectively, it's going to make it easier for us to pass. So that I get that sentiment of it. But I think yesterday you are able to have confidence in calling run plays, because they're not going to be empty runs. That Chase Brown, who I thought was very good in his first real look in an NFL game. I thought he had some really good runs, had that big, I believe, 31-yard run that showed that explosiveness that the Bengals have lacked in the ground game. I thought Joe Mixon was very efficient, as he has been throughout the course of the season. And I think that combination is very interesting. And I think that could add a layer of this offense that could help Browning out towards the end of the season.
By the way, per Grammarist, we're going to clean up some business here. Katie bar the door. Katie bar the door is an exclamation. Ben, you should know this, is an exclamation that means watch out, trouble is on its way. It's an American phrase usually heard in the southern United States, per Grammarist. So you should know that, Ben.
I don't know. Maybe if you go to like Bama, Mississippi, Georgia, I don't even know what part of the South. The South is a very large swath of the country. I have not. It's an interesting thing. I thought it was like a reference to like from like Cheers or MASH or who knows. I would love to know where this comes from. So I'm not trying to age you here, Trags, but I think that's I would love to know. It's got to come from somewhere. Right?
I didn't make it up. I'm just telling you, Ben. I did not make it up. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. Let's get back to the seriousness of the Monday night win, the 34-31 overtime win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. It takes the Bengals to 6-6, and certainly in the playoff conversation now, if they can beat the Indianapolis Colts, who, by the way, are in the number 7 spot officially as we enter this week, week 14, I believe it is, on the NFL schedule. Indy is in that 7th playoff position. That's the 3rd wild card spot, and they enter at 7-5. Bengals beat Indy. They have the tiebreaker with Indy. And then if you're talking really down the road, I think, Ben, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a Bengal fan, you start pulling for the Houston Texans to win the division so that you're not battling with Houston for, in a tiebreaker scenario, because you obviously lost to Houston.
Yeah, I think it's really tight when you look at it. You look at really, the 3rd seed, which is Kansas City, and then all the way down to the 11th current seed in Buffalo. There's only 2 games that separate all of those teams. And so there's going to be a lot that happens between now and the end of the season. And if you're Cincinnati, you've got to find a lot of solace that teams that are ahead of you in that wild card battle, you're going to face Indianapolis, you're going to face Pittsburgh, you're going to have a shot at Kansas City later on in the season. There's going to be a lot of matchups that, the Bengals can still find a way to get into the postseason. And I agree, you would, if you're a Bengals fan, you might want to root for the Texans to be able to go in there and, maybe win the division. That way you have the tiebreaker over a potential wildcard team against Jacksonville. But, all signs, the Bengals can, and I don't want to overreact too much.
It's one game. I get
so
that.
But if they can play at a similar level and just be competitive and be in these games, then they have a shot to make that week 18 game against Cleveland really be for something. And I think that, even if you do not feel this is a team that can compete for a championship, and let's be honest, Trags, even if Joe Burrow had been healthy the whole season, I still have very serious concerns about the caliber of this team as it pertains to it being a championship level contender like we've seen the last couple of years. I think that still is in question, but if you're able to get into the wild card and at least extend that postseason streak to 3 years, I think inside the building, you've got to feel really good about the effort you got and then figure out a way to make this team better moving forward.
If Anton Harrison is not called for holding Sam Hubbard, we're not having this conversation right now. I mean, right? I mean, we're assuming, that with the Calvin Ridley catching the ball down at the 2-yard line in overtime, with time at that point not being a factor, Jaguars go in for the touchdown. It's ball game, and Jaguars win. Bengals are 5-7. Great, story for, obviously Jake Browning putting up the numbers he did, but the Bengals are, for all intents and purposes, on the outside looking in. But because Sam Hubbard was held, the Bengals took, full advantage of it. Give credit to Jermaine Pratt. He came up with a big play, tackled Ridley for a 4-yard loss on the next passing play, and then Jaguars punted. Those are the kind of things that did happen to the 2021 team when, ironically, they got on a late season run, finished 10-7, but that was, again, with Burrow. This is Jake Browning. And my question here to you, Ben, is how good and how much can Jake Browning build off the Monday night game? And is it a realistic standard going forward?
I think there's to answer both questions. First off, I think that there is a lot he can build from this, a lot of confidence that he can get, that he can go out against a good Jacksonville defense. Let's not get it twisted. This was a very strong Jaguars unit. When you look at some of their defensive rates, this was a team that had done pretty well. And you talk to people in Jacksonville, there were questions about why the offense kind of has sputtered over the course of the season, and the defense has been one of the primary reasons why this team has been so good this year. And for Jake Browning to go out there and do what he did, that was really impressive. Now, that being said, I do think that it is unreasonable to think that Jake Browning is going to continue to do this. Like you said earlier in the podcast, he did something that no undrafted quarterback has ever done. And
Right.
you're going to need, and the Bengals still had to win a game in overtime. So you will have to naturally expect that there will be some regression. I think you're hoping that you get something in between what he looked like against Pittsburgh and what he looked like against Jacksonville. And I think that's plenty good enough to be competitive. You cannot have some of the miscues that you had in that game against Jacksonville. You can't, if you're Tyler Boyd, throw that screen, that whatever that trick was supposed
we
to
need
be.
to get to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it, number one. I mean, they called it twice. They must have felt really good about that, but I think that probably should be the last time we see that play. You want to try to take advantage of some turnover opportunities when they present themselves. You can't let CJ Beathard just go down and
No.
really effortlessly move the ball down the field with the game on the line. Also unacceptable if you're the Bengals. So I think there are some things that you do have to clean up that are bigger issues. But, if you're able to get a kind of a serviceable game from Browning that's in between what he's done over the last couple of weeks, this is a team that should be competitive and be in each one of these games.
The one thing I don't understand about that Tyler Boyd double pass that was picked off by the other Josh Allen, it was intended, they say, for Joe Mixon, because Josh Allen completely blocked out Joe Mixon. You don't see him from our perspective in the press box. We couldn't see him across the field. So we, then looked at the replay, and yeah, Joe Mixon was on the other side of Josh Allen. Why are you pulling that play when you're starting quarterback, when Browning was at that time 19 of 21 for like 224 yards? And I don't think he had thrown the touchdown, or he had thrown the touchdown. They were up 21-14. And at that point, when they called that play, it was 21-21. But to call that play at your own 15-yard line, Zach and Brian, I know they want to use all of the tricks in their playbook, especially when it's in the passing game, but I think it's time to retire that one, like you said.
It's a little too cute. Listen, and Tyler Boyd, he can throw the ball a little bit. I believe he has some quarterback experience back in his high school days. So he has some ability to be able to throw the ball. However, I would advise against that. I think it's just a case of sometimes
throw it downfield, Ben. Throw it vertical. If you're going to make that mistake and it gets picked off, let's say 30, 40 yards down the field, it's not nearly as egregious. You gave Jacksonville in a tie game the ball at your own 9-yard line on a silly play.
Yeah, I think, honestly, no matter you take Tyler Boyd out of the equation, it's just a pass that should never be thrown. If you think about it from a schematic standpoint, a ball across the middle of the field horizontally is ideally
deep in your own territory.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. With that much traffic there. I mean, normally when you see a throw back across the line of scrimmage, like Zach kind of mentioned, there isn't as much noise at the line of scrimmage, but because of how many folks were there, that was just not going to work. I mean, I don't fault Boyd because, he's not a guy who sits there and throws the ball. He's not a quarterback by trade. And so, it's just one of those things that did not work out. But, I think that that is going to be forgiven because of how good the Bengals looked offensively. Zach Taylor, I think you've got to give him a ton of credit for how the offense moved. And let's be frank here. He had come under some criticism. I know you see it from the fan base, especially online, over how good this offense has been, even with Burrow. And I thought that was we had a stock up, stock down, as we do after games on ESPN.com. And, my stock up was Zach Taylor for how good that offense looked. And I think, if you're a Bengals fan, you've got to have confidence that, this offense can be good. And Taylor is a big part of that.
You know what I think his best adjustment last night was after the first drive? It was rolling Jake Browning out more on the boot. And he looked like a more comfortable, natural quarterback. He looked more like, I think, his University of Washington days when he set all those passing records. He was throwing very accurately on the run out of the boot. And he just looked, you could tell as soon as he became a little bit more mobile in the passing game, he was much more comfortable.
Yeah, I think, and that's huge. You want to get your quarterback settled into a game early, give him that confidence, so then you can go and progress through the playbook, through the call sheet over the course of the game. So I think you have to give credit where credit's due. And like I said, I think Zach deserves a ton of credit. The trick plays notwithstanding for how good
Right.
that offense looked.
Right.
And I think that they called a really good game.
I would agree with that 100%, Ben. I want, as we finish up here on this podcast, after I would call it the most thrilling win of the season for the Bengals, all things considered, and what was at stake. It was a season-saving win. There's no question about that. I want to talk about two moments post-game in the locker room, and I think you know the two I'm talking about. I felt like being a little bit evil from Jamar Chase, and two, the jackass dance stunt from Orlando Brown Jr. I want your takeaway from the two of those incidents, because I'll tell you why I thought, and I wrote this in my column for today on CLNSCincy.com. The reason that was significant is I thought it showed a genuine chip on their shoulder, Ben. And I think for a team that was languishing about the loss of Joe Burrow for the season, I think that's a kick in the ass, and I think that could be a good thing going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I tried to get it out of Jamar after the game as to maybe why he felt like he needed to be evil. But, he said that, I think he didn't want to throw anybody under the bus or really make a whole lot out of nothing. But I don't think that it should be overlooked that he had comments about the energy last week
Yes.
and how it was not good. And, and he was, he was kind of, I don't know if he was making jokes or he was kind of fed up, but he said, maybe guys were, it was kind of unusual comments. He said, oh, maybe it was cold outside, or maybe they didn't feel like showing up to work today, or things of that nature. And I think Jamar, is someone, especially when you look at it, you're talking about somebody who is in a contract year, essentially wants to get a massive extension at the top of the market next year. There is a lot personally at stake for Jamar.
Right.
And so he doesn't really have time to be sitting here and feeling sorry for himself or the fact that his quarterback is now out for the year. He still has to go out and produce, has to perform. And I think the fact that he wanted, and he kind of downplayed this, but, I still believe that, there has to be a part of him that wanted to come out there and have an edge and say, this is how we're going to play. We're going to go out and have the confidence, have that swagger that we see when the team has been really good. Jamar, we've seen the double birds that he's flashed to Minkah Fitzpatrick. We know what he can do, what he can be like on the other side of the ball when he starts chirping. We know how the Bengals, the self-confidence that they have when they've been rolling the last couple of years. We saw glimpses of that last night for a team that entered the game under 500. And I think that's huge. I think the fact that Orlando, just spontaneously said that, he just looked in the camera and delivered a strong jackass. I got some big Eddie Murphy vibes. I feel like if I had an Eddie Murphy voiceover, it would have been perfect in that situation. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm telling you.
No, I'm laughing because I agree.
Yeah.
It was a surreal moment. And, and you and me and everybody else in the press box, we see it go viral, but when you don't see it live on TV as it's happening, it's a different impact. But when you actually see the video of him and all of a sudden everything stops and he yells jackass, it's hilarious. And, I just think, whether or not he gets fined by the NFL, who knows? He might, but I think it kind of delivered this message that we got to play loose, we got to play free, and we don't give an F. I think that's kind of the attitude that, Orlando Brown Jr. was expressing there. And I think, it's kind of a signal from the team on the behalf of Orlando Brown Jr. Yeah, we do hear what's being said, and we do hear when we are being disrespected. The air quotes coming into play there. When we are disrespected, we're going to respond to it.
Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again from this team. It's almost like they relish, like most teams do when they are counted out and they've got something to prove. And, I'll be honest, I had questions about what exactly this team was playing for, how much this team was really
Right.
going to fight down the stretch. We've seen kind of being, with us being around the team, I think we've seen enough over the last couple of weeks, especially in games. And then, as we kind of go about our business, and wondered really, what is this team going to look like moving forward? It's a big gut check time. And the fact that they got riled up, that everybody counted them out. I mean, you saw the line. They were double-digit underdogs on some sports books to a Jacksonville team that is good, but I don't think the Bengals should ever be at this stage in their franchise a double-digit underdog to anybody. And so I think that there was a lot that they needed to prove. And I think that, I think they wanted to show that they're not out of the woods yet. This is still a competitive team. They still have a lot that they can play for. And, Zach mentioned that earlier in the week, but, I'll be honest, when I asked Zach if he felt like this was still a playoff team, I don't know if I was really expecting him to say, yeah, I think we can still make a push. I was maybe expecting a little more coach speak and a softer answer, but I think this shows why he genuinely believes that this team still has a lot to play for. And I think if you're on that roster right now, you've got to have a lot of pride that you want to go out there and close this year out as strong as possible. And if you can make the postseason, that is huge. I think everyone's going to look at that as a significant accomplishment given the circumstances. And, there were, like we said earlier, there's going to be a lot that needs to be retooled in the offseason moving forward
Right.
for this team to compete for a Super Bowl. But you have to know that at your core in the locker room that you're built a certain way. And these kind of moments bring that out. And I thought Zach Taylor highlighted that point in his press conference after the game.
They found their purpose on Monday night, Ben. That's what I think. I think they found their purpose. Now they could go out and throw out a stinker against Indy. And, frankly, I don't think I'd be that shocked if that happened. Or they could build upon this, beat Indy, and then they have to beat Minnesota at home, a team they frankly should beat. Again, another backup, Josh Dobbs, right? They're going to see Josh Dobbs for a second time this season. Dobbs isn't out, right? He's still playing for Minnesota.
I believe so. It's so tough to keep up with all these.
I mean, there's so many quarterbacks getting dinged up and sent to the bench. But see Josh Dobbs, a quarterback they've already beaten. Then you have the Steelers, who may or may not be without Kenny Pickett. He got banged up and knocked out of the game against the Cardinals, losing, by the way, to the Cardinals, a 3-win team, was it, by 14 points at home. Again, that's inexcusable. That should never happen to a Mike Tomlin coach team. So you're talking about 3 games in a row now where you could draw up a scenario realistically where the Bengals should win. If they won all 3 of those games, they're 9-6. They're not going to win the division. We all know that. That ship has sailed and it's in the mid-Atlantic, not coming back. But getting to the playoffs is what they're playing for. And again, on Monday night, I think you saw some sole purpose to that effect.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any concept that maybe, that the best days of the Bengal season were behind them and, they were maybe just kind of, biding their time until the offseason. I always thought that was, when we heard that you saw all the draft talk, people were already, working up their mock drafts. I go, this isn't the 2019 or 2020 Bengals. Like, no. This is not a bad roster. This is a team that should be good enough to be competitive against a lot of teams who have backup quarterbacks. So, the Bengals, for them to go out there, I'm fully expecting them to at least win 1 or 2 more games. I mean, there's no reason that this team shouldn't be competitive against the likes of Minnesota, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. I mean, those 4 teams are not very good teams. I'm going to be quite honest. They are not. They're not good. And I don't know how good the Bengals are, but, for what they are, they should easily be competitive in those games. And Trags, you know me, I am not always the most optimistic person about this franchise. So if I'm saying that they should be 4-1, I firmly believe it. I'm not just blowing smoke for blowing smoke's sake. So I think that there is a lot that this team can still show. And like you said, I agree. I think there is a purpose to be had. And it wouldn't shock me either if they come out and maybe we're a bit complacent. But, I think it's, up to folks to keep asking those questions, and we'll see if that ship remains, if they continue to have success and they stack another win this Sunday.
He is Ben Baby, does a tremendous job covering the Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN.com. Be sure to follow him on Instagram Threads. You can do so with his handle, BBaby41, all one word. What's the significance of 41? Anything?
You know, it's the big German. I should have I wish I had an artifact.
Oh, a Dirk. You don't have to look for it. Dirk
Yeah.
Nowitzki.
Oh, of course. Yeah, here you go. Look at that. There's a 41 right here. A
There
Whataburger
we
10.
go.
The only Whataburger 10 I've ever stolen is obviously I had a 41. I was like, this is coming home with me. So that's a rite of passage. Also, I did get me some good food in Florida. Got some Whataburger. Got me a Publix deli sub.
Oh, yes. You, by the way, you were raving with some Bengals staff officials on the field before the game as we were walking back up to the press box before the game started. And you were raving about Publix down in Jacksonville.
Yes, yeah. If you get the chance, the grocery store, it's fine, but the deli really is solid. Get you a chicken tender sub, get it tossed in some buffalo sauce, throw some cheese on there, get it toasted. You're gonna be set.
I'm a big fan of food, so I will savor that the next time I'm at a Publix, which has that available to me. How's that?
That sounds great. I think the better we can eat, the better we're living. So I'm all for that.
Amen. Well, he is Ben Baby. I want to thank Ben for joining me on this edition of the podcast. Want to thank everybody out there. And of course, thank our sponsor. That would be FanDuel Sportsbook, the exclusive online wagering partner of CLNS Media Network. For Ben Baby, I'm Mike Petraglia. And until next week, keep that jungle roaring.